Good morning. It's an all-new segment here on CMajor Before the Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to be sharing your most pressing questions this morning. And stay tuned for student shoutouts. Stay tuned for some homework examples and more. That's all coming up right now on CMajor Before the Show. And my wish this morning is for everyone who's tuning in that you do get something out of today's show. I'm very excited because I have some students that are doing some great things across the summer, and they are not resting. They are not taking off the entire summer. They decided to use the summer to catch up on their piano lessons, their piano study, their research. They are pulling in their families. They're purchasing new instruments, they're buying pianos, you name it. It's just a lot going on with my students. So I'm going to start off today's show with student shoutouts, and it's for the students that are working hard across the summer. And so I want a lot of applause this morning, and we're going to share some funny moments as well. But the first student I want to give a shout out to is the one who has learned Star Wars, the main theme, from memory. And he also has bragged that he can play this theme with his eyes closed. That was his own personal challenge. Student who learned Star Wars main theme from memory can also play with his eyes closed, his own personal challenge. So shout out to that student. So big cheers going to that student. I have another student who is learning Darth Vader's theme. His personal summer music goal was to learn to play with correct fingering and everything in place. And that was the first tune that he wanted to learn. He had it as a goal to learn that tune. So big shout out to my student learning Darth Vader's theme on the piano. Shout out to him. So you probably heard some laughter thrown in there because we had to laugh. I mean, if you've seen the Star Wars trilogy at all, or part of Star Wars, and you saw the part where Darth Vader became no longer evil, then it's something to remember if you watch any of the Star Wars movies. So we had a little bit of a laugh about that as I walked in the door and he was playing the Darth Vader theme, and I said, Darth Vader's here. And so we all kind of laughed about that. I was like, no, you're not Darth Vader. But anyway, shout out to that student who's doing great things with his music making. And he had a lot of challenges before with his learning. He was just learning songs that were not fun to him and decided he wanted to learn something that would really motivate him to play the piano. He's doing great. We were able to play together a teacher-student duet, and he was able to record himself, and he's just doing really remarkable. So big shout out to him again. And now I'd like to give a student shout out to a student who has already picked out her music exam pieces. So she had the task of choosing which A piece she wanted to play in an upcoming exam, which B piece, and which C piece. And so what she did was she got her mother involved. So her parents are both very supportive of her taking these music exams and scoring as well as she can on them, and just being super supportive and saying, just do your very best. That's all they really want. And they love her very much, and they are encouraging her to be the best that she can be. And she's already picked out her pieces ahead of time. So a big shout out to this student. Also, a big thank you to her mom and dad for entrusting me to teach her. So it's been a journey, because when we first started, we weren't sure which direction we would go in. And she had had some challenges, I believe, in her piano study. Just had not been with someone that was motivating her to go in the direction she wanted to go. And then we found this really wonderful music exam program that worked for her. It doesn't work for everyone, but in this case, it worked for her, and I'm really, really glad that she found something to really move her forward in her music making. So a shout out again to her, and now a big shout out to a student who figured out her toughest question in her music theory workbook. That was a big move for her. So big shout out to that student. Yes, and here on CMajor Before the Show, we celebrate, we applaud everything, because nowadays here in the 21st century, no one really has to take piano lessons, but if you choose to take piano lessons and you're able to find your own path, then good for you. It's really, I think, encouraging, it's inspiring to other students that want to be like you, and I invite everyone who's listening, the listening audience, to share your successes. I want to hear about those over at CMajor's Classroom. See me on social media at CMajor's Classroom, and I have an announcement about something that's very exciting that's happening with CMajor Before the Show on social media, but I'm going to say a little bit more about that a little bit later on in the broadcast. Also, stay tuned for the new segment, Dear CMajor, that's coming up too, so that's going to be a lot of fun. But I want to go back to this last shout out that I just gave for the student who just jumped into the water and said, yes, I've got to do it. There's something that I am aiming to do for the summer, and that is to improve my music theory. So before she goes back to university, she wants to know that she's going to have a leg up, so to speak, on what's coming up in her studies, so that she can secure the grades that she would like to secure, and also to continue to develop her musicianship. So I'm glad I'm able to help her with that, because you never know. You never know when somebody needs that type of help. But it just turned out that I have the resources available to help her with her questions. So you heard me mention in the last episode, I did give you an outline of some of the topics that come up, but this particular homework help, she needed help with time signatures. So in her case, she is doing homework across the summer, so I'm not going to play the "Did you do your homework" sound today, but in the future, you will be hearing that sound, especially as we go into the fall season, because everyone will have some homework to do once the school season hits. But imagine you are working on time signatures, and you have questions on simple and compound, duple, triple, and quadruple time signatures, and you've studied time signatures already for 3/8 time, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 2/2, 3/2, and 4/2. All of the simple time signatures. And now you are faced with trying to understand compound time signatures. So you need to understand 6/8. You need to understand 9/8. You need to understand 12/8. What do you do? So that was the question that came up. And so these are some of the most common additional time signatures that you will come across if you're studying at a particular level. And this student is not going to be taking the formal music exam, but again, at the university level, she just needs to understand a little bit more about how simple time and compound time work together so she can have a better go at the testing that may come up for her at university. And so there is no difference in the notation of a passage in 4/8 time and the same notes written in 2/4. So, for example, you can have a time signature of either 4/8 or 2/4, and the notes will look the same. However, the time signature will affect the way that the passage is performed. So, for example, 4/8 means 4 beats in a bar. 2/4 means 2 beats in a bar. And the passage looks the same because in 4/8 you write the beats out as eighth notes, while in 2/4 you write the beats out as quarter notes. Let me say that again. They look the same because in 4/8 you write the beats as eighth notes, while in 2/4 you write the beats as quarter notes. So if you didn't know that, there's a way to catch up on studying how time signature works. See me over at CMajor's classroom a little bit later because I'm going to be posting something over there that can help you if you are doing some summer reading on music theory. Also, do not hesitate to get together with your local music teacher, someone in the community who can explain simple and compound time to you. And so this real-life homework example had to do with a passage that was written in 12/16, and then the student had to rewrite it in 4/8. So what I did was I went ahead and posted a music example over at my new social media page, CMajor Before The Show, on Facebook. So I hope you will join me over there and you can at least see a performance of a piece that is played in 12/16 time. So check it out if you have a chance. I'm going to repeat the example in a moment, but just giving you a heads up that there are some real life examples out there and some real time music theory issues that we are dealing with. And so I was very, very proud of the student that she was able to pull it together and she was able to find her way by rewriting the passage in 4/8 and finding the solution, that the solution was to rewrite it exactly the same way except to play it as triplets in 4/8. So I want to give another big shout out to her. That was great. And so here on CMajor Before the Show, I have a little bit more homework to share with you, some more homework examples. But I'd like to pause here just a moment and get myself together, and I'll come right back. So I'll see you in a moment. You're here with C Major here on CMajor Before the Show, and the next homework example I'm going to give you is one that deals with spelling notes. Now, the last episode or two, we've been talking about playing piano by color, and believe it or not, it's something that is still happening today. So as I've been doing my research across the summer to find out a little bit more about the idea of playing in color, I've also noticed that there are some theory examples of color coding your notes. So I want to share that. I'm going to share that over at CMajor's Classroom. So CMajorsClassroom.wordpress.com is going to show you some of the resources that we're talking about here today. And if you find that helpful, feel free to write in and let me know, because I definitely want to hear from you about what's helping you. And also, if it's a conversation starter, if it's something that you're talking over coffee with your colleagues, if you're a teacher that's listening in, then I invite that, because I like the dialogue. I personally like talking about these types of things. So I was looking through a workbook for music theory, and in the workbook, they were using colors. And what I liked about that was that they were not limited to assigning one color to a particular note. So, for instance, you could color the C's orange. You could color the D's green, E's yellow, F's blue, G's red, A's brown, and B's purple. So imagine that. So that's a very different color scheme. That's a very different color legend than what we have been talking about before. And so here's another example where the colors have shifted. So before we said that C's were orange, but in this example, now they have you coloring the C's green. They didn't say anything about D and E, but you can choose what you like D and E to be. F's would be orange, G's would be yellow, A's would be red, and B's would be purple. So I just thought it was really interesting. It is a workbook, and they are showing these notes on the staff. One more example of how you can color code your notes. And let me know if you're coming up with your own color schemes. I think that's great if you are. But C's would be purple. Let me start in ABC order this time. Although in this workbook, the music alphabet is not in order. It's just calling out colors. So I will start in ABC order. So going with A's first this time. A's would be in orange, B's in yellow, C's in purple, D's red, E's brown, F's green, and G's blue. So who knows why this particular publisher chose to use those colors, or maybe they were just having fun or just using it as a fun activity. But again, just knowing the combinations that you can choose, I wanted to put a mathematical spin on it and say, I wonder what mathematicians would think about that. So I did mention talking with my friends who are in the math field just to get an idea of what they are thinking about. But of course, they're mathematicians. They have much larger problems to worry about than trying to figure out how color works on a keyboard. But still, I thought it would be a fun conversation to have. So, real-time examples, real homework examples here on CMajor Before the Show. We've talked about theory exams at a certain level. We've talked about theory workbooks and activities, fun activities in color so far. And I just want to mention that coming up on a future episode of the CMajor radio show, I'm going to be talking about rote versus note. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Really, it shouldn't be rote versus note, rote and note maybe, or using rote with note learning. And it's an interesting conversation that's coming up because the music educators of today are still exploring the rote idea. So it goes beyond what's already out there and just saying, how do you engage students? How do you keep students engaged? It's a really large conversation that's taking place. And so I'm looking forward to that. So mark your calendar right now for August 14th on the CMajor radio show. I will be talking a little bit more about that. And hopefully in the next episode of CMajor Before the Show, I will read a description as well, just to give you an idea of my thoughts. But you know what? You can go over to Blog Talk Radio right now and read a description for yourself if you happen to be over there on that website. So I want to say a little bit more about my own homework because some of you are curious about what I'm working on, which is kind of funny. I have to laugh at that. I love my students. I have a range of students and have had a range of students across my piano teaching endeavors. Let me say it that way. But it seems that I tend to attract a lot of students between the ages of 25 and 52 for some reason. Around the 25-year age group, these are business professionals. These are parents who studied the piano as children. They took piano lessons, and now they want to get back to it, or they're using piano as a way to help them get through their week, help them get through their day, and all levels of professional careers, I must say. And so as you ease a little bit more into the 30s and 40s, I'm still seeing that trend. But as we get closer to 50, some of my adult students are early grandparents who are now thinking about their grandchildren's future. What are they going to leave for them to do? And to think about doing. And so they're thinking maybe we should get into music making for the first time, for instance. Maybe we should seriously think about taking piano lessons. And so these are the types of students that I'm running into, and hopefully the ones that are also listening to CMajor Before the Show, I feel like they are. So my audience is a mix. It's that age group that I spoke about. But if there are listeners younger than 25, they're probably listening along with their friends and their parents. And if you're older than 52, then it may be because you have a grandchild that's taking piano lessons. And so you just want to know some of the issues that are coming up. So hopefully by sharing that here on the show, it's helpful to you. And my other audience would be my colleagues, other teachers who want to have this dialogue. There's a lot of teacher training that's available from different publishers, a lot of workshops going on around the nation and things of that nature. And I know from talking with other teachers at the lesson studio that it feels good, I'll have to say. It feels good to have a conversation with other teachers about their successes, what's working for their students, and then to more or less compare side by side what works. And so, having said all of that, I just want to say that I'm very excited about our new segment today called Dear C Major. Very excited about that. So let me talk a little bit about that, because these are real-time questions. These are questions in real time. These are questions that students have asked me, and I have been in a position to answer these questions for them. And so let me just share with you a few of those right now. But before I do, let me do as I promised, and I'm going to share with you what I was doing with my own homework. So someone wanted to know, what is CMajor doing for homework? So I was saying before that my students are really, really funny. They make me laugh. They really do. And so I had a student that gave me a personal challenge. She said, I know you're classically trained, but I really want to hear you play some jazz. And I thought, oh boy. I know I have friends that are in the jazz world that are serious jazz players. And so I'm not even sure if I should try to challenge myself with that. A friend of mine once said, well, I'm sure it's back there somewhere. And I think he was right. But what I did was I thought about some of the teaching that I've done. And I would say the most fun I've ever had, and you heard me mention this on an earlier episode, the most fun I've ever had with playing piano in a way that made you just feel consistently happy and joyful was when I was playing a left-hand stride piano style. I just love it. I think it's fun. It's something that you can incorporate with folk music, folk tunes. There's some genres, some people will argue, some styles of music that should never be played with a stride bass, but I have to laugh at that. I was thinking about something I saw on the internet where somebody was making a joke about that, saying songs that should never be played with left-hand stride bass. But I want you to think about some of the most famous pianists of our time that have used this style of playing, and I have to mention, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying his name here on CMajor Before the Show. I've visited his show in New York, and he's a great person and just one of the finest pianists I've seen play in person, and it's Harry Connick Jr., and he has been playing in this style of playing for a very long time. So he has a playing style that recalls the music of the 40s and the swing era. And part of his retro sound includes the syncopations of Dixieland and the right hand and a strong left-hand stride bass. The left-hand stride piano style plays a single bass note on beats 1 and 3 and a chord on beats 2 and 4. And then the right hand just swings. So that's the part I have a little bit of a challenge with. So when I grow up, I want to be like Harry. So I hope that's taken with good humor. But I really do admire his piano playing. And so the eighth note figures should be played as dotted eighth note figures in the example that I'm looking at. And so if you want to know a little bit more about the score that I'm looking at, then see me offline. I'd be happy to share it with you. But I did talk with one of my students about this, and Harry Connick Jr., he was a student of New Orleans style piano jazz, and he began his career in the saloons on Bourbon Street. He attended the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, where he studied with Ellis Marsalis, and his style continues influences from the 1940s and the 50s, encompassing bebop and swing. So these are the things that I have not studied, but I've read about, I've heard it, and I think that if you have the talent to play in this way, then, that's great. That's wonderful. But I've challenged myself to play something called Handful of Keys, and that's the music by Thomas Fats Waller. And it was after I saw a video of someone doing it, and I thought, how are they doing that? And so I have a sample of a score that's in front of me that I've been able to pick up. And so I've been practicing that. And how's it going? It's going pretty well. I'm going to play it for one of my students probably later this week or next week. But I think I set a goal for myself to try to play it for her in her upcoming lesson and just to see what she thought, to see if she thought it sounded authentic enough. So that's what I'm doing for C Major's homework. So I hope it was fun to listen to. Shout out to me. Shout out to C Major. But getting to your questions, dear C Major, I have some important questions, some pressing questions from you. And the first question is, what does 8VA stand for? So I have some students that are learning this for the first time, or they're coming to me and then they're asking sometimes about things that they were not clear about. So 8VA stands for octave. AVA is really a translation of the Italian word ottava, Ottava. And so it means, in a lot of cases, to play an octave higher. But of course, I want to consult a textbook just to make sure that I'm saying it in a way that you will understand. So sometimes you're asked to play an octave higher. Sometimes you may see octave written as 8VE, the number 8, and then VE. And then there are some examples that you can see for yourself on that. And then if I go to another page, I see it written as 8VA. So what I was saying before, 8, the number 8, and then a lowercase v, lowercase a equals ottava, which is the Italian word for octave. And then if you see 8VA with a dotted symbol, it can mean to play over a note or notes, and then perform an octave higher. And then if you have 8VA with a dotted symbol, it can mean under a note or notes and perform an octave lower. So again, if you have any questions, see me over at C Major's Classroom. I'll be happy to talk with you further, or see me offline about this symbol if it's new to you, or if you have any more questions about it. And then what I like is that there's more reading that you can do to learn more about octave signs. So there's a topic on ledger lines and octave signs. And then there's something called Octave Transposition. So I have a student right now who's delving into transposition for the first time, and she found it a little bit scary, but she's doing great. We had a long conversation about it, and she just said, "Oh." She let out a sound that let me know that she really started to see what we were talking about. So sometimes I like to give shout-outs in the middle of the show, and so I'm going to give a shout-out to her. It's always great to see someone when they get something, when the light bulb really goes on and they just light up because now they finally understand what it is they're supposed to do. And so my next Dear C Major question is, what is the C position and how do I set up my hands? So I get this a lot too, and this is why sometimes you need the help of a teacher, because some students come from teachers where the teachers were always setting up their hands and telling them this is the position they're going to be playing in. And so they didn't necessarily try to read the notes for themselves to see where the starting note was for the right hand or the starting note was for the left hand. And so sometimes there's a misunderstanding of C position versus middle C position on the piano. And so C position usually means that you're starting on C in both hands and not middle C. Middle C is usually when you're sharing both thumbs on middle C, but the C position is where both hands are in place to play a C pentascale. That's a 5-note scale. And in your right hand thumb is starting on C. And then in the left hand, the little finger, the finger 5 is starting on C. And so then both hands can play at the same time as needed, C, D, E, F, G. And so you can set up your hands that way, just an octave apart. Or you can put more room between the hands as needed. But the C position is different than the middle C position. So hopefully that answers your question. And feel free, like I said, to talk to your piano teacher and music professionals in your community and just use it as a conversation starter about their understanding of ways to position your hands on the piano when it comes to using C. Okay. Now, next question. Dear C Major, what is a lead sheet and how do I use it? So, I was very excited for this one student to learn to play from a lead sheet because for the first time, he could see that there are symbols that the left hand could play while the right hand is playing melody. And so it was a different way for him to think about playing 1, 4, 5, 7, for instance, and not rely on just seeing the notes on the staff. So a lead sheet will do just that. It will provide for you the treble staff for your notes, and then you play those notes with the right hand, and then the left hand plays the chord symbols. Now, another way of doing that, if you just want to follow the structure of the song and play just chord symbols, then you can do that too. So, playing lead sheets is fun. It's not something that I had the advantage of using a lot in my own piano lessons, but it came much later where I was working with adults who wanted to learn to play by ear and by chords only, meaning they only wanted to just play what the changes were and not worry so much about melody. And so I was able to show them how to use a lead sheet in that regard. Also, sometimes if you play with a band, then a band will offer a lead sheet. So it's enough information for you to improvise or to keep up with the changes that the band is playing. So hopefully that answers your question about lead sheet. Dear C Major, how do I begin to learn my key signatures? That's a good one because I recently read on the internet that there are camps, believe it or not, camps for music theory class. And it appears that these camps are mainly for adults. But imagine you had trouble with key signatures all your life, and then finally someone makes that clear for you. So I know there's a method out there called 7. So look into that. I want to steer you towards something I believe is called Vic's Camp's Music Theory Class for Adults by world famous musician Victor Wooten, who's author of the book called The Music Lesson. So if you have a chance to, check out Vic's Camps. Vic's is spelled V-I-X. And so they really take the time to delve into their fun way of teaching music theory, and I think it's great. I personally think that it's really, really great anytime that you can make music theory learning fun for anyone, really. So check it out. And so one way to learn your key signatures is using a method that they call 7. So for instance, if you want to know the key signature for B flat, it has 2 flats, and then if you add 5 to that, then you get a total of 7, meaning that B would have 5 sharps. The key of B would have 5 sharps. The key of B flat would have 2 flats. It's something like that. I didn't really learn my key signatures that way, but if that helps you, then by all means, go for it. And of course, they can explain it a lot more clearly than what I just did. But it's something along those lines. And I was talking with one of my students about it who's going to college for music study, and she was explaining how she came to understand key signatures, and we talked about it a little bit. So I would say you can use circle of fifths. You can just learn, as you go about key signatures, and talk with your teacher about the best way to learn key signatures. Who's helping you? I think in the methods that I use with my students, everything is gradual. So I really haven't had a huge problem with my students learning key signatures. But sometimes when I inherit students, sometimes it's a little bit of an issue that they just aren't clear about the key signatures. And so whatever helps, whatever works for them. So how do I begin to learn my key signatures? I would say learn it in a way that works best for you. That's really my short answer on that. And then I have some suggestions. Dear C Major, I am a first-time adult student. I have hopes and dreams of learning to play the piano. My children's friends all play the piano, and now I feel inspired. Where should I start for lessons? So I'm very happy to answer this question because this student came to me because her son's friends were all playing Minuet in G, Fur-Elise by Beethoven, and other tunes on the piano from classical repertoire. And she just thought, they're having so much fun, I want to do that. And so for the first time as an adult, she is learning to play the piano. And so I want to give a shout out to her. I think that's great that she's really taken the challenge, right now to come into something that's new for her and a little bit scary, I think, too, at the same time. But she was willing to do it, so shout out to her. Now, before time gets away, I do want to make some announcements, and I'm going to say that we're very excited to have CMajor Before The Show now on Facebook, so join me over there. You'll see some things that I'm posting over there with regard to the show. Also, starting next week, CMajor Before The Show is expanding. Believe it or not, I'm going to be on Monday through Friday and on demand. So it's a test. It's a test to see if it helps to have it on more than just one time a week. And as you know, the C Major radio show is taking a break, a midsummer break. So C Major Before The Show is expanding to help you, I guess, have a little bit more exposure to some of the issues that are out there for piano lessons, and to have a chance to listen to some of the homework examples before the C Major radio show comes back on. Because once the C Major radio show comes back on, it's going to be more intensely focused on music theory. I've been promising to do that for a while, but I'm really planning to do that as we go into the fall season, because I want to help my students as they go into the fall season, and they're going to be more focused and really studying very hard to understand some of the issues that come up with piano lessons. So we're going to give more special attention to music theory. But feel free to see me on social media. My social media is changing, and I want to make sure that I am covering topics. I'm covering the issues that are important to you. And so starting next week, I'm just going to see how it works to be on 5 days, and to see if I have enough information to share with you in those 5 days. It's based on real life examples and issues that come up, so there's no reason why we can't delve into that. And I'll see you next time, right here on C Major Before the Show.